Well, Indiana's season is now over after missing the NCAA tournament, and you're not. I'm not saying this to place blame necessarily, Jack, but Myles Rice was brought in from Washington State, and I think Mike Woodson thought he would be a big injection of offense, and we saw that sometimes. We you talked about it a couple times during the regular episodes of the podcast where he had multiple games over 16 or 17 points, but then like multiple games under 6 points too, which that's kind of a weird discrepancy when you bring a guy in to be instant offense. So I guess what were the expectations when they brought him in? Like, how excited were people about Myles Rice when he got to Indiana?
Yeah, I think he was arguably like I think Umar Bala was rated as like the number one transfer, so a lot of people probably thought he was the big get. But I think if you're looking at it of a perspective of why is Indiana going to be better this season than they were last year, I think it was Myles Rice and the improved guard play. I think he goes and he was a Pac-12 all freshman guy last year, but at the same time, it's his third year of college because he had some redshirt seasons. Um, so I think he was a big reason that a lot of people thought this team was going to be better going into the season. And even if you include that exhibition game at Tennessee, I don't remember how many he had, like something like 18 points or something in that game against Zakai Ziegler, like a SEC Defensive Player of the Year. So there were big expectations for him, going into the year.
I stole a little bit of your thunder talking about his numbers being up and down here for this part, but how
Right.
how did the season play out for him? I mean, like I said, there were ups and downs certainly, but you need good guard play to make runs, and obviously that Indiana came up a little bit short there.
Yeah, so just kind of to depict that inconsistency, he had 13 games with 6 points or fewer, but also 9 games with 16 or more points.
Mhm.
And so I feel like that he was the guy that Woodson, maybe you could argue some other guys were even more inconsistent, which is hard to believe, but like he was the guy that I think Mike Woodson was like, we see the flashes here of a guy that can be really good. I mean, he was so fast, so quick with the ball, had a good handle, but there were just games when he was either forcing shots or turning it over too much. Um, I think the concern with him going into the year was could he become a good 3-point shooter because he only shot like 27% at Washington State. He finishes 32.5%, which is not terrible, but it's not particularly strong. Ended the year averaging 10 points, 2.8 assists. I don't think he was quite as good of a passer or maybe in the pick and roll game as Indiana would have hoped him to be. And he kind of had a weird year defensively too. I felt like for most of Big Ten play, um, he was not the best defender, and he could kind of get beat to the basket by a lot of opposing point guards. But then he kind of flipped the switch, and in that Purdue game, he was huge along with Anthony Leal in shutting down Braden Smith. So I thought he kind of had a weird year defensively from that perspective. But overall, lost his starting job by the end of the year to Trey Galloway and Anthony Leal, and he kind of had the ball in his hands at the end of those Purdue and UCLA games that where Indiana fell just short, and maybe the season's differently if one of those shots fell, but you could probably also say that those were kind of forced, and so I don't think he really played out how Indiana wanted or needed him to be. From Mike Woodson's perspective of bringing in a guy at a really important position at point guard going into the year.
Well, with some high highs and some low lows, was giving him a grade tough. Where'd you land with him?
Yeah, I'm now that I'm saying this, I think it might be a little bit harsh, but I'm going to stick with it. I gave him a C on the season. I think, um, you know, down the stretch when you think of like the most important games, he didn't show up again. He didn't. He went scoreless against Oregon, and in the Big Ten tournament, and that's a big game that you need him. Loses the starting job, kind of didn't make plays down the stretch in some of those Purdue and UCLA games, like I mentioned. So I had some good moments, but I think the reason that Indiana's season didn't go well was because the transfers and some of the guys that we thought were going to be a little bit better. It just didn't end up working out for guys like him and Cannon Carlisle.